Okay, it is myself, Umulimo Tamaye. We Will Win Baba, coming at you, episode 3. We are talking about police brutality today. Once again, I'm speaking to you from Wales, and we have got and leave me.
We've got Charlie. Hello.
And Husni, hello there, guys.
All the way from Cambodia at the moment.
Plus 855.
Hey,
We're having a bit of a moment right now.
oh goodness, it's very serious. So as we've told you, today we're going to be talking about police brutality. Of course, this is in response to the George Floyd and the whole instance. That instance particularly is one of the ones that has sparked the current discussion. But let's please not forget, this is not something that is modern. This is not something that just came around this year. Number 7 of the Black Panther Party in 1967 released their 10-point program, and number 7 on that list was "We demand an end to all police brutality and the murder of black people." It is 2020 and the exact same instances are still happening. We're still seeing police killing black people for no reason and then getting away with it within the legal system, and that's what we want to speak about today. So as I said, we've already mentioned George Floyd, RIP, the George Floyd protests and the BLM protests globally. We have already acknowledged this. Last episode, they were already the largest global civil rights marches kind of movement that's ever been. It's the largest movement in global history, basically. So that's already happened and is forcing these kinds of conversations. Now, our opinion we've already talked about how our opinion is that because the George Floyd protest because the George Floyd incident has been covered very well, we're going to talk about other incidences where this has happened. We're going to emphasize how the occurrence of police brutality transcends borders as well. So we're going to be talking about a minority of American examples, and we're going to be talking about examples elsewhere. We'll be talking about the specific points that go towards how this seems to be acceptable within wider society and how the police actually get away with it. These people are never charged, which is something that is time and time again brought up to them and isn't dealt with. All right, I've talked plenty. Go ahead, guys.
I think as well with the whole George Floyd and BLM protests that have been happening, it's brought these conversations forward in other countries. In the UK, it's brought forward a lot of the police brutality that's been happening there, and countries like South Africa as well. It's actually ignited people to kind of start talking about it and actually bring it to the forefront so that people can actually be aware of it, because I think these things happen so often, it becomes normal in a lot of these countries, and no one talks about it, and it doesn't make front page news, particularly globally. It may do in the country where it's happening, but if you're not based in any of those countries, you don't tend to hear about it. So we just obviously want to bring that to the forefront, and let the world know in a way that police brutality is a black problem, and it happens wherever you are. Doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't just happen in the US.
Yeah, it's a global thing, really, to be fair. Wherever I feel like there's black people, police are always treating them anyhow, and that's obviously linking back to how those people were either enslaved, colonized, or vice versa. So I think it's a black problem around the world, everywhere you go. For example, Bahia in Brazil has the highest number of black people from Africa, living there and stuff. And every country you go to that has a black population, which was either illegally moved there via slavery, or even people being colonized in their own continent and country. You see that they're being treated, as I said, in a way to just like it's a very inhumane way. It's like rearing cattle.
Citizens, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like rearing cattle. It's like, okay, you can't go here, you can't go there. It's like being on a real life farm, where you're being basically slaughtered every day at will. And what people need to understand is they assume that a lot of these places, the police are trained very well, but their training, I think, basically comes from the rhetoric comes from a very old school, inhumane way, basically, where they don't see anyone who is of a particular color as human. So as soon as you interact with them, that's why you never see a policeman being really nice to someone, treating them like with dignity. I am arresting you on blah 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 blah. Very calm manner. It's always like, some sort of weird commando role, crazy, juiced up, adrenaline junkie person who's literally wielding a gun at your face or literally trying to punch you in the face. So that's the issue we're dealing with, I think, globally as well. Like, that's a big thing. So people shouldn't really forget. It's not just an American thing, it's a global thing at the moment, definitely as well.
Yeah, and I think when you look at the statistics in the other countries as well, these police brutality is much higher than in the US. For example, in South Africa, the South African police service kills 3 times more people per capita than in the US compared to the US. So if you were a Black person in South Africa, you're 3 times more likely to be killed by a police officer compared to the US. But we don't hear about these stories when you look on the news. You hear only about the US, and it's such a shame because we need to be made aware of these things so that we can obviously do something about it and actually put a stop to it.
Definitely.
Yeah. So I'm going to come back on both your stories. Let me start with South Africa since that's the one we're chatting about now. So while I was looking up a few bits around police brutality in South Africa, the Marikana massacre to me is something that I'm very aware of. This was a massacre where the miners went on strike. I want to say 2011, 2012. It only just predates Cyril Ramaphosa, and that's the South African president, and that'll become relevant in a second. But basically, these miners who, if anybody knows the history of South Africa, miners were got from everywhere, including Lesotho, Tanzania, Swaziland. So the people from further afield were brought in partially because they spoke different languages. It was easier for the establishment to mistreat them because they didn't have an immediate surrounding of people that were supporting them. So the miners from Marikana were protesting. What they wanted was better pay and more time off so that they could actually spend time with their families, go and in some cases go see their people back home. They were wiped out. They were shot. I'm not sure how many bodies were taken at this point. I'm pretty sure it was in the 20. It was at least in the 20s. And this is not the typical kind of police the typical kind of police brutality that we're kind of used to, where there is a story that where they try and remix the story afterwards. No, the police went there armed with fully automatic weapons and killed these miners for protesting for their own rights. So that in itself is one thing. The other point was the media coverage around it, which of course demonizes these miners and says nothing about the police or their brutality. And once again, it wasn't an international story. This is something that should be an international story, and it wasn't. And once again, that is because these people were black and their lives are seen as being worth less. The company who were actually, paying these miners, the company that these miners worked for, and where those minerals were going, is actually the London Mining Corporation. Lonmin, who've actually been taken over since that time. A lot of it to do with a lot of the takeover was to do with the negative press that they were getting at the time. But let us not forget that for over 300 years, 400 years, that London Mining Company has been the one that has been mistreating these people and has been extracting the minerals from the land with no return. There is absolutely no benefit to the locals when these kinds of minerals are extracted. And by that I mean these people still don't have the opportunity to go to school. The housing is still substandard for human habitation. Excuse me. They're warehoused, and only recently they've been warehoused in housing which is still small and substandard, but the infrastructure was basically built for villages which are just essentially full of miners. So instead of creating some kind of pipeline where people can work themselves out of poverty, so that these people's kids can at least not be miners, because no miner wants their kids to go down there. They've encapsulated everything and made sure that their kids have the same lack of opportunities as their parents. And I think, yeah, so that's how it ties in. But the police brutality at the Maracana massacre was the main topic that we were talking about there. Brazil, Akala has loads. He spent so much time talking about Brazil, and one of the other points that people forget, and this is attached to history, is that over 80% of the kidnapped Africans that left the African coast actually went to the Americas and not to the colonies at the time that went to become America. So when we think of Brazilians, usually most people will think of somebody fair skinned or mixed race like Charlie, when in reality the majority of Brazilians are more like me and Husni, where their lineage is purely African. The only reason they speak Portuguese is because their people were kidnapped and brought over there. They are still
Colonizers'
Africans.
language.
Yeah, exactly. It's they are still they're still as African as they left, and they in terms of their lineage and their ancestry. The only thing is that they're now not represented. When you look at the political class in places like Brazil, it's very apparent that they are all very light skinned. That's not a surprise, and that's not a coincidence. Is one of the things I want to say. Yeah, in terms of what some of the stuff that Carla's talked about in the favelas, the general rule is the poorer it gets, the darker the people in those favelas are as well.
Yeah.
The evidence
Yeah.
for the existence of this system is terrible, as is so when we talk about police brutality, these police do not police these communities. The only time most people see police is when there's some kind of raid, and that's when people die. At the end of the day, like, the police go in there with no consideration for human welfare. And let's be fair, if they wanted to actually make an impact, solve the poverty. I mean, that's a topic that we'll talk about another time. But yeah, places like Brazil, South Africa, none of the stories of police brutality ever make it out of there. And the reason I always make sure I emphasize that one is the media has a massive role in
Absolutely.
allowing this to perpetuate. Sorry, okay, I went off on a bit of a. You guys go, please.
No, that's fine.
Yeah, no, like I think overall, like what you're seeing is just the problem is with these the way the police are and everywhere you go, it's a power trip, right? To the point where if you get a badge and a gun, you think you're now God and you treat others that you're meant to serve and protect, as they keep saying in the States and I'm sure other countries. But the funny thing is though, like other countries, like not funny as in ha ha ha, but funny as in like sad dark, is that people will literally get killed in front of you and no one blinks an eye.
Oh
Like
yeah.
especially black bodies in South Africa, people just get thrown into the back of these cars, beaten with like clubs, beaten with batons, like roughly kicked in the head. Yeah, RIP, like kicked in the head and everything, and then like people die. But then the problem is, for example, the Maracana miners, Cyril Ramaphosa, this guy's worth about 500 mil. He's got shares in the mine. He was sent an email. So was the
Hmm.
chief of police. I don't know whether she's Zulu or something, but she's a black woman. She's the chief of police, and she basically they spoke to the stakeholders of the company, right? And all they wanted, these guys, was just a bit more money and time off, right? That's nothing too crazy. And instead, there's body cams showing police hunting down these miners who ran away after the shots got fired. They all got peppered and killed like dogs. A few of them got away at the back. They were running through the mountains trying to hide. And there's body cam actually on YouTube showing the police guys chasing them,
Yeah.
saying, "Oh, there's one behind that rock. Go kill him." Shooting them, saying, "Oh, your juju's not going to protect you now. You pussies. What are you going to do now?" These are like
Yeah.
dead black bodies, and there are even a few black guys who are part of the shooters, part of the police, saying all these things to them. It then became a them and a us situation, and that's the problem with the police, and they keep saying, "Oh yeah, we're here to protect the people." Well, not really. Like South Africa, there was a case where like Charlie showed me actually, where police were basically they're being killed as well. Like imagine that happens in America. So in South Africa,
Yeah.
police misbehave, they get shot up.
Yeah, so in South Africa, the police have security guards because
The irony.
it's funny when you think about it. Obviously not funny when it's actually
Yeah.
happening, but it's funny because like people just go out, kill police officers, because a lot of the police officers in South Africa are actually black. They're the ones who work on the front line.
Yeah.
And it's like the sergeants and I don't really know much about
the corporal man.
Yeah, the ones who are like higher up tend to be the white guys. And the officers and staff who are actually there on the front line are black men. And they get shot up and everything, and it's a really dangerous job.
Definitely.
And they even have to have security guards because of the ramifications of being a police officer in South Africa, and it's because they have such a disregard for black bodies. Growing up in apartheid times, a lot of the officers would have done as well. They feel worthless and feel like they aren't worth anything.
Yeah.
So they think that they can do that to their fellow black people as well as other people doing it to them as well. So it's scary, like, yeah, it's that mental slavery that the colonizer still has over the black bodies in South Africa, and it's such a shame that this stuff is still happening in this day and age.
But it's the brutality as well. Like it's really weird.
Yeah, it's a very like.
What's that brother, that Mozambican taxi driver in SA who got tied to the back of the police van? Got tied like this to the back of the police van in broad daylight, and they drove the car as if he was a trailer, dragged him on the floor, and the man died in custody. And I'm like, okay, Bunda is Mozambican, whatever, right? But this brother is a black brother. He's from the continent. He looks like you, everything. And you decided instead of, bruv, the doors of the van were open. You know, when you go to these police vans, there's these like metal sort of chairs on both sides, you know, like whatever you can sit on, right? Instead of saying, let's put this guy in there, you know what? Even if they threw him in there, it's not nice, but you know how it's like. At least he's in there, right? Instead, they're like, the doors are literally flapping, the irony. A man is literally hooked to the back of where the trailer goes and dragged through the road. And all these people are watching in broad daylight. It's ridiculous. So I think that level of desensitization, both in the police and the whole population, well, it starts with the population, because police, it's not like they're like oracles from God, fam. No, they're human beings.
Part of the population as well.
So if the population is fucked up, your police is going to be fucked up. Your education is going to be fucked up. Everything's fucked up. These people are like born and bred in these situations. So yeah, for us it's the brutality, but in other countries it happens like crazy. In the West, they control it more via the media, via other ways of hiding it. Because whenever someone dies of color, what comes up? Oh, he had a bud of weed that was 1 millimeter long, and it was from like 5 years ago.
There's always going to be some dirt. Like when somebody black dies, they're going to find some dirt so that they can justify it. Eddie Griffin, that's the one, he's a comedian, but it's one of the things he said, one of the things that this establishment seems to want to do is have every black man have an asterisk next to his name. He was talking about celebrities in general. He was talking about Kobe Bryant and how it appears that the most... It basically seems like they're going to try and find every example of a wholesome black person that we have and just make sure that they have an asterisk there so that they can kind of maintain this myth of the criminality of black people. Just that it seems to be somehow built into melanin, this excessive melanin syndrome that we all suffer from, which is what apparently leads to criminality. And obviously, like, the thing that annoys me is that generally people buy it. It seems to be generally people buy it. And yeah, I mean, that's one of the real shames of it. Sorry, Husni, keep going.
Yeah, no, Charlie, like you were going to add to the whole brutality thing and police and, you know.
Yeah, so I think just to add on to the other countries as well, you've got police brutality happening to the indigenous people in Australia as well. Which doesn't get talked about.
Yeah,
and I'm sure New Zealand as well. Blah, 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 my mind's just gone blank. Help me here.
Canada as well. They got indigenous population as well.
Yes. So in Australia, with just to bring it back to Australia again, with them, because the Aboriginals and the Indigenous people, they are treated literally like second-class citizens there. A lot of the brutality that happens again doesn't get publicized, and Australians themselves are quite
very dismissive,
oblivious to it. They
more
just
arrogant.
Oh no, that doesn't happen in our country, type of thing, which happens in a lot of countries, because it's the same in the UK as well, where they don't think that type of stuff happens.
Yeah, the Met police officer was just saying in the UK that she thinks the Met police are not racist.
Well, exactly. I know that just about 2 years ago, there was an elderly Aboriginal woman who was mistreated by the police. Someone who was completely respected by the community, and she was wrongfully arrested. An elderly woman, she's old, and she was completely neglected in her cell in Australia. And then she passed away from the injuries that had occurred from the police brutality and from the way that they handled her. And till this day, they're still fighting for her justice, and that happened in 2017. And this was to a older woman. So to think that they are doing that they're doing that, and they have such a lack of respect for someone who's old.
Yeah.
You can just imagine what they're doing to like the youth and to younger people as well in Australia, and how they're covering it up. So I think it's important to bring light to these issues as well, and not to forget that police brutality does happen in these places, and even when you don't think it does. And Australia itself has quite a dark past. We know how they've been mistreating the Aboriginals there.
That's
all I want to add on that.
No, that's the point that I was going to build on, is that we need to remember Australia is one of these places. I kind of forget about how racist Australia actually is, because of how little coverage there actually is, if that makes sense. So one of the things we need to remember. Sorry, Husni, what was that? Can you get closer to the mic?
Yeah, no, I said Foster's Barbecue and Beaches and Golden Skin and all that shit. Moving away, Holly
Bondi stands.
These guys are racist with a capital R.
There's a hard R on their racism. What am I saying? So Australia, we need to remember that Australia, the reason that British flag is up in that corner, first of all, is because it was British people that went to found it. During the colonial era.
They didn't find it.
Sorry?
They didn't find it. It was already founded. Aboriginal people were already in Australia. So British people didn't find it. And from what I know as well, it was prisoners and ex-cons who got sent over from the UK to Australia.
They didn't want them here.
They got exiled basically over to Australia. They sent them over there thinking that, you just go over to this barren land, and then turns out it's actually great over there.
Turns out there's plenty there. So that's the point. I was just making the point that the Australia that we see today was founded on the genocide of the Aboriginal people. Like, the Tasmanian people have been wholesale wiped out. Same as the Taino people in the Caribbean, the original inhabitants of those areas. The Tasmanian people were wiped out. We don't even have like a genetic index to reference to those people. The Australians, who at the time were the British, wiped them out. That's one thing. Number two, flora and fauna. Black people were considered... it was in the 60s when black people, as in people with melanin like you and I, were considered as flora and fauna, which is plants. Until the 1960s, we weren't human in the eyes of the law. How is it that people are actually surprised that this level of racism actually exists within a system which which legislated against black people in this manner. Of course they're gonna act like this. And yeah, I think those were the major points that I wanted to add on to it. That it's really not a surprise to people like us who know, because of the foundation that it was built on, the kind of effects of police brutality that we see and the disregard for black life is something that kind of comes with that. Because none of this, at every stage of reform, this is one of the things I've been thinking about in general that applies to each of these systems. At every stage of reform, when there has actually been progress made, the very top level of the people who control these things are the ones that aren't swapped out. They can swap people out at the lower levels, and even go on like recruiting runs. Yeah, we're going to make it 20% black, that kind of thing, and this tokenism, but of multiple organizations and institutions. But the point is that as long as the higher ups do not change, and the actual not the community and the sorry, go on.
The main, you mean like the main chiefs? Because the problem is a lot of these people get all these power inherited. They inherit it from these old people who then also have really, really bad rhetoric. So what happens is it's like basically a breeding thing, right? So there's no change in that whole DNA of thinking, of thought. But then everyone else, the foot soldiers and people who can basically, well, they get used as like slaughter. So if anything goes wrong, if a minority person gets killed, they're the little puppies that get culled first. But we're looking at the big the top. They never get touched because they have like an array of people around them who are gonna die first before they get to that level. So that's the issue basically.
Yeah, and it's exactly that. There's never, you can't reform this out, because these people are the ones who actually set the society within these institutions. So obviously, because we're speaking about police in general, like the very higher up police and the people who write the rules. It's not just the people who write the rules for the police. As long as they believe in the rhetoric which has led them up to this point, and as long as basically the leadership stays the same, the whole organization will follow along that same trajectory. Like, it's not going to change. And that was the point I was making. There's never been a reform around this. You can't reform this kind of thing. It is literally something you have to, in my opinion, the police have to be abolished, and public safety needs to be looked at, needs to be taken, a different approach needs to be taken to public safety, because the police are not for public safety. And actually, anywhere that you look, you could look at the UK, the US, South Africa, the police come out of organizations that were dedicated to protecting the property of the rich. They haven't really changed their function ever since.
Yeah, to piggyback of that, actually, yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Like for me, it's like the way the police are and what they do is basically they've been used since slavery time to basically stop the movement of slaves, protect, prop up the white person's what do you call it, like basically authority. So a lot of the times, like now you see so many Karens and Kens, if you want to call them. They're just out here questioning people, like, why are you in my neighborhood? What's your name? What's your date of birth? What star sign are you? Like, and then if they don't give them an answer, like man, they will fully call the police on you. Like, it's actually that crazy now. And the police will come without knowing nothing, see you and see Karen and Ken, and they'll literally straight come to you. Even if you're dressed in a full-on suit, whatever you look like, they'll get you, tie you up, and put you in the back of the car, shoot you if they want to shoot you, but they won't question Karen and Ken and be like, okay, well, what's the issue here? Like, you're meant to be a mediator, right? But it's clearly it's day and night. Let's be honest, right? Biased. And it sounds crazy. Like I think the only time the police as a whole will stop fucking with people is if Mandem actually start fighting back and shooting them and killing them. It sounds really horrific, but unfortunately, like, I know you're not meant to, put violence with violence, but sometimes these juiced up steroid heads who dropped out of high school, who got bullied, who got nothing to do, doing bloody like tumble rolls and stuff as if they're in an action movie, killing actual human beings. If they're not shot and if they don't feel pain, I feel like they're not going to learn at all. And they've got a system to protect them. The union, do you know a union can actually withhold withhold a police officer from talking to people who are trying to maybe, let's say a police officer kills someone, he'll run to the union. The union will say, give us one day, 24 hours, so they can listen to everything, the tapes, manipulate, do all sorts of fuckery. One whole day, can you believe that? If that was a normal, if that's a civilian, they're not gonna have one day. They'll get charged, put in a prison, boom, done. And that's the problem. The unions are there to basically protect these guys who are basically the dogs in Animal Farm. If you've seen Animal Farm, the cartoon, the pigs get the little these dogs, and the dogs do all the dirt. Oh, it's really good, man. You should see, it's mad.
Oh, you haven't seen it, Charlie? Yeah. You need to watch it. You need to watch it.
So that's the issue.
Who's the author again? Sorry, Husni. Yeah, I agree with the issue that you're facing, but you've just reminded me the author, because I've got, you know what? I've got his Orwell.
George
that's the one.
Orwell.
Yeah. I'm Orwellian. I'm a big Orwell fan, and actually the Animal Farm, and I've got Why I Write somewhere back here, were like foundational when it comes to my kind of knowledge base and what got me into kind of this in terms of the political stuff. I wanted to come back on a couple of things that you said as well. Well, actually, everything that we're speaking about in terms of the police brutality, the police unions, and their responses ultimately. So we've not even gone over George Floyd. And one of the most hurtful things about George Floyd is not just the method in which he was murdered. 8 minutes 46 with a knee on his neck, pleading for his life, and like literally he died asking for his mum, or his grandmother, sorry. But it's the point that that officer went to work the next day as if nothing went wrong, as if nothing happened, and it was only through protest that he was initially put on administrative leave, if I'm not wrong, that he was actually like he was put on leave. I don't think he's even been fired. I think there's still something going on. So it was the protest that even achieved getting him off that in the first place, then applying that to all 4 of the officers, and then even getting him charged was a thing. But they charged him initially with 3rd-degree murder, which we may have said this before, is can be classified as accidental murder and comes along with something like a 3-year jail sentence, of which he'd probably serve half. And then
On good behavior.
yeah, exactly. That was a point, and then it's only been bumped up to 2nd-degree murder, which I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not going to pretend I know the rules, but there are no apologies. If you spend 8 minutes 46 seconds on somebody's neck, that is murder. 1st degree. You knew what you're doing. You meant to do it, and you don't even need the video evidence.
No, you
Charlie.
don't. But I think with so just from what I've read around it, with 1st-degree murder, you have to have intention. So you have to have premeditated it. You have to have planned it in a way, and actually thought it through. So with that, it becomes harder to prove. So when you go to court, which this will probably go, and then it will go to trial and blah, 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 it's going to be difficult for the lawyer, well, for the defendant, prosecutor, whatever the terminology is, to prove that he had premeditated this, and therefore he could then not get charged with 1st-degree murder. So although 2nd-degree murder, although we all know it was like 1st degree, there is no doubt about it, it's going to be difficult when it comes to the law and when you go to court to prove 1st degree. So in reality, doing it as 2nd degree makes it easier to prove, and he will at least then do some time. And I think 2nd degree you can get life, from what I read.
But he's not going to get life, definitely.
No, he won't get life. He won't get life, but he can get the maximum sentence, which I think is the same as 1st degree. So yes, yes, we want 1st-degree murder, but how can we prove that?
I genuinely don't have any faith in any justice system wherever you go. The justice system is made by the rich for the rich. The police are the rich people's like guard dogs basically, right? And some of them, like, clearly all of them have rabies and they do some fucked up shit. And all they do is just basically nothing. Like, literally, that's what they do. And a lot of these conservative white people who are coming out saying, "Oh my God, these Democrats or these leftist snowflakes want the what do you call it?" They were saying that they want they want it to be anarchism. You know, they want to get rid of the police. This is going to be so bad. But listen, those people are the same people that call the police on anyone with a bit of melanin, right? You know the amount of calls since Donald Trump's been elected and all this craziness going on. Karens and Kens calling the police for everything. Hi, 911. There's a black man cutting his lawn. Yeah, he looks really suspicious. Like, what the fuck?
They're getting brave now.
They're getting brave, and I think there should be a law, in my opinion, if the police guy comes to be like, "Yo, what's going on? No one's been hurt. Cool, I'm giving you a ticket. $5,000 fine. Done."
I swear that there is one though, but people just don't follow
the
through.
police don't enforce
the police
Yeah.
The police don't enforce it because they want to go, they want to arrest a brother, they want to roll around, do some action jack figure. That's what they want to do.
But the thing is as well, it's when they see like white people, they're like, "Oh yeah, it's okay. Like,
yeah, you must be right because you're white.
We don't want to give you a record. It's fine."
Like, it's ridiculous. So I think either black people should start calling the police on random people. Yeah, there's a white man walking behind me in the subway. Just random shit. But the funny thing is, those tickets that are made for the whole public, giving out these whatever, are now going to be given to the black people because, oh, you wasted police time.
Exactly. That's the thing. Black people can't call the cops. So if they do, then they're gonna get killed. All of a sudden now this law is gonna come out and be like,
there you go. And all these white commentators in America saying, oh, the Democrats, aka the leftist Labour equivalent, are basically making the country bad. We need law enforcement. I support law. You support law enforcement because they're on your side, and you can call them for anything. You can spill your tea. Basically, you could dunk your biscuit and it might break. You could call the police. You'll be fine. A brother can't call the police. You know, this brother got 1.25 million settled. He basically, a woman in the video called the police because she said he stole the car. She said he had something that looked like a bar and he basically opened the car. That was his own car. Police came, 6 of them, punching him up, locked him down, and then the woman was like, "Oh, I didn't want to profile. I feel really bad now." And the officer was like, No, it's fine. You don't feel bad. Like, we're fucking this black guy up, girl. You called us at the right time. We wanted some action tonight. We got it right. Guess what? It was his car. He never stole the car. It was his own car with his own money and everything that he bought the car with, and now he's getting a 1.25 million settlement from the city. But money is nothing because the police and people on the right are the ones who are pulling the strings and everything. They have the money. Right? So everyone dying, they don't give a fuck. They'll just pay it. They'll be like, cool, this guy broke a black guy's jaw. Yeah, we'll fund it here. There's a couple mil. Like, it's becoming like this. That's the issue, you know? And it sounds crazy and radical, but until police feel what they're doing to people as well. Like, imagine someone got those police guys what they did to George Floyd, and they got that done to them in the hood. Got the biggest guy, Mark Henry equivalent, shout out WWF, and sat on his neck for like a good 10 minutes.
8 minutes, 46 seconds.
WWE now.
Yeah, they changed it up, innit?
You know, I completely agree. There's so much that you've just said that I want to unpack. The biggest point, actually, because I've been writing down a couple of the bits that you've mentioned. Charlie, have you got anything to say before I go?
No, you can go. 1,
how are we supposed to trust these police? How are we supposed to trust these police? Diaspora if you were to look at what diaspora actually means, but basically people with African ancestry, blah, blah, blah. We make up about 2 million people. It's going to be closer to 3 by 2050. 3 billion people. We'll see what proportion of the human story that is by that time, but that's a lot of people, and you're telling me that all of them, no matter where they are brutalized by a system that is supposed to protect them. How are we supposed to trust these people, and how are we supposed to go on? Because ultimately this is one of the points that I see. This is unsustainable. One of the demands of the of the current Black Lives Matter movement and all the chapters defund the police and what that looks like. So one of the things that Husni has already mentioned was how they get so much funding, and there's actually a video on Vice that came out very recently that was talking about how I think in the year leading up to 2020, so 2019 and however they do their years, this police force, I'm not sure which one it was, seized 2.3 billions worth of assets, most of that to do with, of course, drug money, drug seizures and stuff like that, and they kept 1.8 billion of it. I don't think people see how perverse that is, because they are literally incentivized to allow these drug dealers, and let's be fair, they're basically incentivized to continue allowing these drug dealers to function until they can take all their assets. And for anybody that's seen the way that these shady kind of deals go, people act like this kind of thing is what happens in films. It really isn't. Like, I cannot compute the amount of drugs that are in any of these Western societies could not be possible without the police's without police without accomplices in the police. Simply impossible. Couldn't happen. Okay, so how are we supposed to trust these people? Is the main point there. Number two, the courts. One of the things that Husni said is if black people start actually applying the law in terms of if they start doing what these Karens and Kens are doing, basically, then the law will be used to punish them, even though it has not been enforced to punish the Karens who are calling the police on black people, and black people are being brutalized from that, often for no reason. This guy that got the 1.25 million settlement is a massive exception, let's be frank. I don't even know which coast he's on, but the majority of black people, when they get beaten by the police, they don't even get their shoelaces back. Like, they're just told to go about their business, and that's that. Let's not forget, one of the reasons Tupac became so prominent was because he got a beat down from the police. He took it to court, and because Tupac actually at least had money and could fight the case, he won. So, I mean, that's another thing. This relates to, okay, so point number 3 relates to one of the points that I think both of you had already made, but like police unions and their code of silence. How are we supposed to trust these people when... So if we look at the US, one of the things that they have started implementing, body cams. There are body cams in the UK as well. There are still mechanisms like as easy as leaving the body cam off or just not turning it on. And then these police then go ahead, brutalize people and say, oh, we didn't turn the camera on. On top of the point that, like you said, the police unions themselves will basically reserve a time for when they can doctor everything, which is the same as collusion. Let's be perfectly frank. If it was anybody else in any other industry, if you get arrested, the reason they take you into custody is so that you can't make a story and you can't collude with other people and bring them into your lie. And that's precisely what the police do. Police. Look, it's literally like, I can't even help it. I do not trust these people. On top of that code of silence, there was, for flip's sake, I should have written his name down. I'm going to keep this one very brief. Ex-Navy Marine officer goes into the police. He's a black man, of course. On one of these arrests, he witnesses an excessive amount of force being used, reports it. He is fired, and the officer who actually perpetrated the violence was eventually moved up. Anyway, he went about all the correct ways of trying to get reinstated and not even attempting to sue the police, but none of that went his way. Anyway, finally, the dude snapped. He went on a killing spree. And it wasn't even like just over nothing. It was another one of these police murders which triggered him to go on a killing spree. And this is one of the things, is because not only did he know what he was capable of, but he knew what he was seeing. It was domestic terrorism. It's the police, the people who are sent out or who are mandated to look after us, who are out here murdering people in death. Like, they may as well be a death squad. And yeah, and that kind of relates to the very last point that I was making. How do you correct this? Because ultimately, with the police being stretched thin at the moment, and the militarization of the Black Panther Party was directly as a result of police brutality. What do they actually think is going to happen now? Because it's literally getting to the same stage. Go ahead.
No, for me, I think the best thing to do is, as you were mentioning, like defund the police and introduce restorative justice. I think that is probably the way forward in terms of this. We've already seen examples of restorative justice in some countries where they are already starting to look at that. South Africa actually being one of them, surprisingly. They are doing it with minors,
Excuse me.
so with children offenders, and doing it in a way where they're trying to avoid putting children in courts, and rehabilitating them, finding out what the root cause of why are they doing this crime, and then giving them the appropriate counseling, whatever it might be, the appropriate rehab that they require in order to not reoffend. Because what we're finding as well is that people going to prison, people going to jail, whatever, are not, they are reoffending. So they're coming out and then reoffending. So clearly the justice system's not working. Whatever is happening, it's not doing what it needs to be doing, because we're still having this large amount of crime that's happening. So we need to look at other ways where the police don't need to be involved. If we have a domestic violence case, why not call a social worker to come in, and they can then sit down with the couple, obviously keep them in separate rooms or whatever, and actually talk through, maybe the man who's doing the domestic abuse needs some sort of counseling, maybe he needs therapy, and maybe that's what he needs to have, instead of going into prison at the hands of the police, and then getting beat up, getting mistreated, and then he comes out and does exactly the same because he wasn't able to get the type of rehab that he needed while he was in prison. So I think it's important to look at restorative justice and go through that route.
I think, to piggyback of that, I think I think we need to definitely give it a try, because I think in Sweden they also do it as well, where when you're in prison they actually train you to do certain jobs, so when you do come out you're actually a useful member of society, rather than like going back. Because the problem now is a lot of countries, you got a record, we're in hiring, there's a box that you tick on every application. If you say that you're a former felon or have a conviction, there's a 99.99% they're not gonna,
you ain't getting no job.
take you on. But the thing is, governments and other people, if that's the case and you're gonna blacklist people anyway, then make certain jobs that these people can do. Because at the end of the day, say, listen, for depending how crazy your crime is, say, listen, for 4 years, you need to, you need to show us that you're on this grind, you can work, turn up on time, you're good, and then eventually you'll be reintegrated, and then your thing gets wiped off or whatever. But also we have to remember that prisons and that they're also a money-making gimmick. It's a form of slavery, where people are forced to do like labor for big corporations, aka Sainsbury's, Virgin Media, all these companies, and there's even more in China, like in other countries, where people are putting notes.
Secret.
Yeah, they're putting the notes in
Primark.
clothes saying, "Hey, save us from prison." And that's the issue. This is a big money-making gimmick, and these guys are getting paid what, like £8 a week, and they have to. And also, if you refuse this, you then get like time added to your sentence. Yeah, this has nothing to do with your crime.
And this is in the UK that's happening. So you have these big corporations where they're coming in telling, so you know those plastic spoons that you get in your like fruit salads and stuff in Sainsbury's, the prisoners pack those.
Headphones or airplanes.
Yep, and Virgin, your headphones that get repacked, the prisoners do that. And as Hafni was saying, if you refuse to do it, because you only get £8 a week.
Mad.
If you refuse to do it, you get time added on. So you have no choice but to do it. So
for me, okay, cool. If you're gonna treat someone like that in prison, at least make them build their country. Let's say you've wronged, right, and you're in prison. at least do the thing where you're basically giving your time and energy, depending on what crime you committed, to the country. So if they said, oh, you were building the roads for your country, you were cleaning rubbish for your country, you were doing X, Y, Z, and it's benefiting the people of your country, with you've kind of like your community that you've wronged, then okay, I kind of understand that, because at least when you come out, you're gonna see the labor of your fruits. Your family is gonna be able to enjoy the roads you built, vice versa. At least that I can understand. Therefore, the money can be saved.
Yeah, and you're getting a
That-
skill. Like
yeah.
packing headphones in a
So-
plastic bag is not exactly a skill.
So, but the problem I have is when it benefits big corporations, and that's the issue. These big corporations, they're all in a room together drinking champagne. The police, rich people, racist people, they're the ones at the top at the end of the day. They're the ones who like basically have their little areas and stuff. And that's the issue. That's the thing that we're fighting at the moment. And I don't really have any hope that the police will ever be defunded. They're too powerful. As you said, they basically, how do you think Lil Tyrone and all these, people in these little estates and ends and hoods are selling drugs? Like, cocaine itself is from South America and other places where it grows. It gets chemicalized, right? So these people don't have passports to go out of their hood or ends. So how the hell are they now exporting X amount of heroin and all this thing that comes from Afghanistan into their area? There's someone doing it, and it's usually a white guy with a tie who has a corporate job, but he has this as hides it under a logistical company, right?
It's their money laundering way,
There
isn't
you
it?
go.
Like,
And and there's a saying as well, like, people who pay tax basically are the ones who are usually broke. So normal people who work in an everyday job, they're the ones that get taxed like crazy. Rich people, they can claim back tax. Like, I was reading a story where Lewis Hamilton bought a private jet, and man got 3 million back from the UK government.
There you go.
In his tax rebate.
No surprise there.
So
No surprise
it's
there.
a bit mad.
We're going to have to wrap it up soon, people. So we've talked about a lot. I have talked a lot. We've not even approached. So one of the things I wanted to, or a couple of bits I wanted to approach, prison industrial complex and private prisons, how the US's model is now coming over here. And there's a very clear lineage from slavery to chain gangs to private prison, where anybody who has access to what the elites consider their access to the society, chuck them in prison, will still make money, because we're basically selling their labor to corporations for pennies. And yeah, basically the corporations and these businesses make money, and it's subsidized. Taxpayers' dollars or taxpayers' pounds go on to subsidize this system. There was the occurrence that Charlie said, ex-cons. I know this statistic was true throughout the 90s. I'm not sure about the noughties, but it was that in the US, 66% of ex-cons reoffended, which means 2/3 of people, 2 of every 3 people who will go to prison will come back to prison. And that's the point that proves that this system is not working. It's not rehabilitating anybody.
Yep.
Because these people aren't coming out with better skills, they're coming out with much worse prospects in life. How does the government and the people who are then punishing these people expect them to make their way through life once they are no longer convicts? It doesn't make sense. If you plan on rehab...
No, it doesn't, because you have a criminal record now and you can't get a job.
And also prisons as well. They actually get abused there. The wardens beat them up. They sexually abuse them. People act like when you go to prison, it's you and yourself. It's not.
No, you come out traumatized.
You come out traumatized. You're basically violated and human. So people forget that whole thing, like, prison should have sorted them out. What?
Many people come out of prison worse than they went in, because it's one of I think Shawshank Redemption. I'm a big film head. Shawshank Redemption is literally, there's a line in that where Andy Dufresne says, I was clean as a whistle on the outside. I came to prison and became a criminal. And ultimately that's what happens with a lot of especially youngsters. They go into prison having maybe juggled a few things that they shouldn't have, but when they start mixing with the general population, people who've been in and out of prison for their entire lives, and they've got 10-15 years on these youths, and they're going to teach them the wrong thing. Of course they are. What happens? These youths are then made more extreme. They are desensitized to the kind of violence in prison that they bring outside with them. Their mannerisms change. Their psychology changes. People know what tapped is. Like, or at least like everybody knows a version of what tapped is, but nobody ever wants to talk about the PTSD that these people suffer from, both in prison and on a lot of occasions before prison. Let's not forget, a lot of people go into prison already feeling twisted because they may have had to see their friends bleeding on the floor. Like, that's something that has a psychological effect, especially on young people.
Absolutely.
However, police brutality, and everything that underpins it, we couldn't get through that in an hour. We're very sorry, people. We've tried our best. We've made the discussion. We've thrown a lot of
We
we've
tried.
thrown a lot at you.
We can certainly do like a part
Yeah,
two or
most
something,
definitely.
maybe later on.
Can I just
Yeah.
mention a few names? Like, I actually feel terrible without mentioning these names before we close this off. Belly Majinga, Stephen Lawrence, Kelso Cochrane, Mzi Mohammed, Mark Duggan, Christopher Alder, Cynthia Jarrett. So anybody who needs examples of police brutality and exactly...
I have a
Yeah, go ahead,
few.
Charlie.
Collins, Kosa, Sibusa, Amos, Ntando, Elisa Sigasa, Petrus Miguels, Elema, Robin, Montusumi. Oh gosh, butchered that name, sorry. Dane Emmanuel.
Yeah.
As well.
So these are names of people who have been victims of police brutality. Sometimes directly, they've been killed directly by the police. Sometimes the police have bundled investigations and let their murderers go free, and they don't receive justice. Their family doesn't receive justice. This is a big topic. We will have to dedicate some more time to it another time. However, that is going to have to be us from We Will Win Baba. So from me, Umulimo Tamai, Charlie, Husni, Ariamo, We Will Win Baba.
Thank you for listening, guys. We will win indeed.
Baba.
We will win, Baba.
Yeah,
See you next time, guys.
Bye. So be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and like, comment, and
Please.
subscribe below if you're watching on
Yes.
YouTube. If not, follow our Instagram so you can keep updated. It's We Will Win Baba.
Yes. And feel free to send us any emails or comments or any ideas of things that we can talk
Yes,
about in the
yes.
future.
Yes.
We will certainly.
Yes, wherever you're
reply back.
watching this,
Thank
leave
you,
your comments
guys.
below. Get back at us. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Okay.
We will win. We will win.